And our next speaker, Leonardo O'Grady, is from Coca-Cola, which is a company that has really set itself apart as pushing creativity in a very big way, doing lots of interesting, giant creative projects. So, Leonardo O'Grady.
Hi, everyone.
From Coca-Cola, Southeast Asia.
So, Coke has a lot to talk about. Social media has had a huge effect on us, and we've developed a lot of different models. What I'm going to try to focus on today is kind of the larger framework, which is guiding our creative thinking and the way in which we're kind of bringing the brand to life. There's a set of sort of operational things below, which maybe we'll save for another day. Thomas has asked me to keep it very short. So
short and sexy.
Short, thanks. There you go. Manage expectations. I'm going to only focus on one case study, but I will take you through the framework. Some of you, I don't know if any of you have ever seen any of the other Coca-Cola kind of speeches or discussions. Some of it might be familiar. Hopefully the case study will be new. And hopefully we can open it up for some questions afterwards. So again, I'm going to take you through sort of a basic framework, and then I'm going to focus on one case study, kind of as a proof of concept for you.
And we'll also take the questions on the Twitter, SMMHK hashtag. I'll be taking those also.
Right. So I don't know how many of you know the origins of Coke. You know, we began as a pharmaceutical product 127 years ago. It was all natural back then. It's all natural still today. The reason why it began, it was a tonic, basically, in Atlanta, Georgia. And why Atlanta, Georgia was because the trains that brought the spices from Asia and across the world, the lines ended in Atlanta. So there was kind of a disproportionate number of pharmacies there, all of them creating little health tonics, and one of them was Coke. And Coke, the ingredients, without going into too many details, are getting sued by my own company for divulging the formula, was basically made up of cinnamon and different spices and so on. Now, the big revolution, there were several kind of inflection points for Coke, and social media is definitely one of them, and I'll talk about that. But the big one was leaving the pharmacy, and like some little entrepreneur guy saw the opportunity with Coke, and he bought it, and he moved it into one of the first non-alcoholic, ready-to-drink beverages. And the big turning point was distribution. And a lot of people give Coke credit for being a world-class marketer, and that was how the brand built. But if we're being 100% honest, it was the distribution. And this thought of being within arm's reach of desire. Now, that's changed a lot. As a marketing organization, we kind of had to invent it, right? Marketing didn't quite exist 127 years ago. So we kind of made a lot of mistakes and struggled along the way. And we all know that kind of in the 80s and through up until that point, communications was very direct, consumer. We treated everyone the same. It was a mass message. It was really just about awareness, top of mind, and so on. We then kind of shifted, and it got segmented. And not segmented in terms of different age groups, absolutely. But we began to recognize in the 90s that actually people had an odd sort of relationship with the brand and the product. There were definitely people who drank it, but there were also people who bought it, so the shoppers. So there were people who were buying it or supporting it, but maybe not necessarily drank it. And we had to deal with them absolutely differently. Obviously, with the explosion of digital and mobile, we had a big shift into data and into really focusing on how do we create these customized solutions. How do we begin to understand what a person's need is in the middle of the afternoon as they're going along the way and connect with them and somehow be able to give them an offering that's absolutely relevant at the time and that's beyond just Coke, but actually across the portfolio. Now, there's some really cool things that we've done in that space, but what I want to talk to you about today is more around how do we keep the brand relevant? How do we keep the brand relevant in a time where, apart from the Googles and the Facebook, who've become as big, if not bigger than we are, in a few years versus 127 years, we're talking about companies in China that success and power and growth in our industry is happening at a speed that's phenomenal. We will not exist today if we don't shift the focus into providing solutions that are social. and I'll talk about that in a minute. So with this kind of advent of social media, it's forced us to now look more at the interrelationship. There you go. I think this is the sexy bit. So all social media has done for us is it's forced us to kind of redefine the way we're doing our planning. So we've killed kind of vertical and horizontal media plans, and we've recognized a need for this kind of interrelationship between the connection points and how one thing can feed to another, and there's no dead ends. How whatever we do is contributing to a dialogue or a narrative in some way or another that inspires people, draws people in, that are consumers, that are stakeholders, and so on. And through that then helps us build and propel our message. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. I think at the heart of social media, and for us, social media is now at the heart of our brand. And it happened sort of in 2006, 2007. Two big things happened. One was Mentos in a Coke, exploded, went viral before we could even think twice about it. It was on David Letterman. It was on a lot of talk shows. And we didn't even know what hit us. So there was a recognition that people were playing with the brand. It was happening at a much faster speed than we could ever control. And maybe we were losing authorship of the brand. The second thing was Facebook. So we said, cool, Facebook, social, it's a big thing. Everyone's doing it. You know, I'm meeting people I've never met before. A sudden recognition that Facebook that was created by us was a dwarf in the face of Facebook created by fans. So at that moment, we realized that with social media and any sort of social media platform or enterprise, we have to forfeit our control. And that's what we did. So we shut down our Facebook. We gave it to these two guys who are in the middle of nowhere, and they run our Facebook site, and we are mere citizens on that platform. So if you look at kind of the way Coke is evolving, there's 4 areas that we've been playing heavily in social media that are key. I'm only going to focus on the 4th one, cultural leadership, but I'll quickly go over the other ones. One is really about shifting the way we engage. So compelling stories, people talk about it all the time, right? They always say communications needs to be about storytelling. We are forcing that dialogue. Storytelling requires people to respond. A narrative is a dynamic and active thing. If we're putting communications out there that is not involving people, getting people to react, getting people to criticize, getting people to share, then we're failing. We're not being good storytellers. The other one is provoking happiness, which is what our brand is about. The third one is innovating with our partners, collaborating, and creating new spaces. And then finally, cultural leadership, which I'll talk about. So compelling stories. You know, a compelling story is more than just a really funky piece of film, and it's much more than just a set of activations. One little activity like this, which was the hug machine, created a whole set of conversations in Singapore that within 2 weeks had 116 million impressions from around the world, and it went viral all over the United States, back to China, then back to back to Singapore, and then back to Europe. What's powerful about this is it was 100% on brand. It was more than just a cutesy little film. What it did was it helped communicate the values of the brand around happiness. But more critically than that, it was a small experience shared by maybe, 50 stressed out NUS students in Singapore during an exam period that suddenly became 160 million people conversation. So when you begin to think about the power of social media, but also how do you trigger social media to begin to deliver against what you need as a business, that's where it becomes critical. And again, what we're realizing more and more and more, the more we think about so-called shared value as us and consumers, the more we're going to fail as a business. So shared value goes far beyond Wall Street, goes far beyond consumers, goes far beyond us. It's a huge ecosystem of people who engage, react, and drink our beverages every day. The second one is really delivering against provoking happiness, and I talked a bit about that. There's a great example, which I can't go into because I don't have time, but in Thailand there was a natural disaster. Now, there's a lot of ways you can react to that, but the way the team rallied to that made me incredibly proud to work for the company. And they had one task, which was to help get water and beverages to people. They had another task, which was to help rebuild. But the task that, again, is so important, which is about staying on brand, being clear on what your business strategy is, being clear on what's going to make you relevant and important in society, in culture, so you have a kind of advantage, a networked advantage, and stay relevant and build advocacy, was they wanted to return smiles back to Thailand. Now, how do you do that? Right? You can't just go tell people to be happy. You can't show people being happy. So what they did was they created a set of social media platforms, and they invited and they empowered the Thai people to lift their own spirits up, to inspire their own neighbors, and to inspire their own friends. And it was an amazing result for Thailand, but also for our business. It had kind of an unexpected and surprising positive backlash for our business. The third thing is really innovating with partners. And what we're finding is more and more, we can't operate in isolation. And I don't mean it's kind of like a sort of a high-five bonding thing with another marketing partner. It's realizing that the social media space and the way people engage it requires a larger involvement. And one of the best examples of that is the Olympics. From a marketing perspective, perhaps FIFA World Cup is a bigger example in terms of really cool things we did. But what amazed, I think, me and a lot of people within the company was it was two organizations, the Olympics and Coke, recognizing that they had a shared audience, teenagers. They had a shared need to build relevance with teenagers. The problem with the Olympics, as probably most of you know, is that it's not relevant for young people, right? It's kind of my dad or my dad's thing. And so the key was how do we merge music, which is at the heart of teen spirit, and at the heart of what makes kind of Coke fueled, with sport? And how do we leverage the distribution and the relationship of Coke to help elevate the Olympics in the mind of young people? And again, if any of you are interested online, there's a great case study on that. So I'd like to get to the heart of what I wanted to kind of profile today, one of the case studies. And I'm sorry if I'm going too fast. If I am, I apologize. Again, any questions, and we can dwell on those things. I think more and more what we're beginning to find is if we're serious about creating significant pieces of communication out there that are going to have an impact, that are going to mean something, and that are going to really do some brand building, it's not about doing these things in isolation. It's actually doing them as organically. And cultural leadership is key. Cultural leadership, having a point of view, pushing against some of the tensions that are countervailing within society, and playing a role in that narrative is one of the most powerful ways for you to have a purpose in people's lives, and to you not be seen as just a commercial vendor, but to be seen at least creatively, expressively, and as an experience, as something that can maybe add value to people. So increasingly what we're seeing is it's a partially deliberate thing, it's partially not deliberate, is a shift to more and more of our activities being focused on cultural leadership. I'm not going to show this. I don't know how many of you have seen this, but this was a very small initiative that was done in India and Pakistan. And they set up a vending machine that was like a portal from India into Pakistan or from Pakistan into India. And all it did was it invited people to touch, to communicate, to connect. And it was a powerful and simple message of what's possible. And the example I always think is of Peace One Day. You know, this guy who started Peace One Day is just this amazing individual who believes in world peace. But I don't know if you've ever met anyone who says, I believe in world peace. I mean, they often kind of get met with a bit of cynicism and a grumpy kind of response. So this guy said, let's focus on world peace one day at a time. If I can create one day of peace, just one day, what does that mean? And what potential and hope does that put in the minds of leaders? So while we are just a beverage, and we certainly do not think and do not even have pretense to think we can change the world, we do think we have a responsibility to have a point of view and to try to express that point of view against the cultural veiling forces of that point of view. And one thing is about trying to create the connection points for people out there in contexts like this. So the example I'm going to give you now. Are you guys okay? Am I going at an okay pace?
You're going at a good pace, and you just answered one of the questions that's been puzzling people on Twitter. They've been talking about the Coke can in your hand, and there are a number of people wondering when you would actually take a sip from it, and you just did.
You guys are evil, all of you. I was saying to Thomas that I did my very first kind of presentation or speech or whatever with a Twitter feed, and I got very upset and distracted because people were laughing at the Twitter feed. So I was like, what the hell are people saying that's making them laugh? It's very disorienting. Anyway, there you go, I drank it. So one of our markets, the Philippines, has done some amazing things in this space. One of them is one of the areas one of the challenges we had globally was, what is a global tension point for teens? And the brand is about happiness, it's about positivism, it's about making the world a better place in many respects. When we said, when it comes to teens, what is the biggest, most overriding thing that's getting in the way of happiness? And that's kind of the way we frame these things when we're looking at markets. We say, what's happiness in this market, or what's happiness to young people, and what's standing in the way of that? And what can the brand do to at least help alleviate that in some way? So the question on this one was, what's standing in the way of happiness for teens? What is the biggest thing that derails teens in terms of their growth and their happiness, apart from kind of chemistry and weird sexual angst? So one of the things that came out was bullying or labeling. So labeling, as you know, is a very powerful thing. It's not a physical thing. It's when a group of peers or anything label you as something, whatever that might be. And that becomes, in many respects, your limit and your brand, negative and positive, through your whole high school life. And inevitably, your reaction to that, your living with that, begins to shape who you are. It affects your confidence. It affects your ability to do a lot of things. So the Philippines, God bless them, took on a very ambitious effort, which was, if we can take away one day's worth of negative labeling, we can add one more day of happiness to the lives of teens. And again, it's about trying to add one day of happiness, and in one way or another begin to shift the dialogue. The challenge with all of this is that bullying is complicated, right? What do? Do you punish bullies, or do you talk to them? If you punish them, then you're just doing exactly what they're doing. You're using force, you're using ridicule to tell them, to stop them from doing exactly that. So the idea was, again, trying to be positive about this. How do we make bullies a part of the solution? How do we empower the victims so that they get out of the trenches of where they are, to try at least shift this a bit? And this is something that's in the making. It hasn't happened yet. It's happened in part. So I'm showing you one part. The first idea was social media. One is that Coke can only be a steward. We can't brand this. This isn't a commercial venture. So what we did was we went in and we identified a few students that were being victimized, and we worked with the school. And we created a video, a viral video. And the hope is that that will inspire people to join forces and take action. And the idea is that it happens in a classroom, in a couple of classrooms, in a school, in a neighborhood, in a zone, in a country, and so on. And that was the essential thought. So the idea was to trigger, and then to empower, by also helping people have courage through other celebrities and individuals that had been through the same thing, and help them to elicit the change. And then to begin to invite people. They see the video, they share their own story, they upload, they tag their friends, and they create a network. And again, if you think about the power of social media to elicit real change, if you think about the Arab Spring and all of those things that happened with Barack Obama, and even in Singapore, the power of one individual within a connected network of other individuals who empathize with the situation or the cause is incredibly powerful. The thing is, when you're dealing with an issue like this, sometimes you lose sight of the fact that there are people that empathize with you. And once you have that empathy, it's incredibly empowering and motivating. So the idea was that, and then for people who weren't necessarily bullies, you could join the movement and tag your friends. So I'm not going to go into any more detail than that, but I do want to show you kind of the viral video that will hopefully trigger a movement.
First year po ako, nagsimula po yung pang-aasar po sa akin. Baba daw po, ganyan po.
Yung iya na po sa school, parang di na po gusto nyo mag-aaral. Hindi ko po kaya 3 taon na ganito. Sinabi po nila yung delo, saktan po ako nun.
Dahil sa inyo, kaya minsan nawawalan na ako ng self-confidence para pumasok na lang eh.
Tigilan na po yung bully. Para masaya din yung yung hirap pag ganun.
Invite ko kayo para tulungan kami lahat dito para maiwasan na talaga yung pambubuli. Sa tingin nyo, ano ba yung pwede nating gawing hakbang o kaya mga hakbangan na para mahintunat yung bullying dito sa school natin? Sana wala nang pambubuli.
So that was the rough offline. So we'll see what happens with that. But the key thing there is really around the power of these triggers, the power of experience of a few to create a larger dialogue, and that larger dialogue propels whatever that topic, that focus is forward. And in many respects, in a much more powerful way than we could ever do, certainly as a brand. So if you begin to look at that, what we're beginning to see more and more of, and I'll show you one more video, is kind of, we have examples of these all operating on their own, but they're beginning more and more as we begin to look at content and content creation, the convergence of that. You know, social media is also many of those small conversations you have with interested people with the brands, but when you're trying to make big brand statements, it's increasingly beginning to converge like this. And that network advantage in a space where you have Googles and Facebooks, in a space where you have massive brands coming in markets like China, helps to create the kind of brand advocacy you need to keep a brand that's 127 years old, like Coca-Cola, still relevant for young people today, and not just a part of the brick and mortar dust of a long lost era. So with that, I want to show you another video, which I think brings these things together quite nicely. It's a narrative, it's a story. It delivers on the business and the values of the brand. It has a cultural point of view. And above all, it's thanks to a key partnership that we took with Google.
In Project Rebrief, we've reimagined Coca-Cola's classic Hilltop commercial for a modern audience in the digital age. In the spirit of the original ad, it allows users to connect with strangers by sending a Coke around the globe to an unsuspecting recipient, making the world feel just a little bit smaller. The ad can be experienced on mobile phone apps in Google's AdMob network across iOS and Android devices. Made possible through AdMob-rich media ads, coupled with custom-designed vending machines, viewers can truly buy the world of Coke with a few taps on their mobile phones. A viewer can decide where to send a Coke by selecting one of many machines located around the world, from New York City to Cape Town to Buenos Aires. They can then add a custom text message to personalize their Coke delivery. Google Translate converts these messages on the fly, breaking down the language barrier across countries. A dynamic video with Google Maps, Street View, and composite motion graphics shows the Coke's journey from the viewer's current location to the vending machine across the globe. Users can then wait for confirmation of their Coke's delivery or enter an email address to be notified later. Once the Coke is delivered, recipients are not only treated to the generosity of a stranger thousands of miles away, but they can also say thanks by sending a message of their own back to the user. That message is then delivered to the user's inbox, where they can read the note and view a video clip of the recipient's surprised reaction upon getting a free Coke. A gallery showcases some of our favorite shareable exchanges between people around the world connecting over a can of Coke.
Thank you, that's the best Coke I've ever had.
Today's technology allows us to make good on a promise Coca-Cola made over 40 years ago, and lets users buy the world of Coke from the palm of their hand.
Which brings together two of our three themes, mobile and creativity.
Exactly. So with that, I think, as in a world that's increasingly being driven by co-authorship, see there, that's happening. I'm not going to look at those. And please don't laugh. In a world of, where we actually have we're only responsible for around 10% of the content that's online as a company. The rest is actually consumer generated or generated from other organizations. We have, particularly in the social media thing, have to learn how to harness that. And that's what we're trying to do with this. We provide a basic framework, a basic set of values that people can operate and create against with us in mind, sometimes doing a much better job than we do. And then lastly, I think, mobile creates a direct response environment. We're constantly having people react, and we are planning and thinking about our campaigns with a different understanding that it's a direct response society. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to any questions you guys have.
Okay, great. Just one quick question, then we got to carry on. Is how do you measure the effectiveness of what you're doing? Somebody was saying you've done some campaigns in the Philippines with overseas Filipinos, connecting people. Some of these campaigns, how do you measure the effectiveness of them?
So we have different measurements, and I hope this answers your question and you see it as a credible answer. So we look at it. One, we look at it. We have cultural goals. We have things we want to change. So those things are often outside of our existing database. So we say, are we impacting certain social health metrics? And we look to other organizations to get those, and we measure those before and after. One of the things that we were looking at even with the Philippines was, how do you measure a change in bullying? Do we want to set some kind of a destination around shifting it from sort of 1 in 5 people being bullied in the Philippines to 1 in 10. And then there's obviously, for certain types of things, we have our business metrics and all the rest. But what we try
But
to
often with
avoid,
these, it'll be measuring it within in terms in and of itself. So bullying is in terms of how much we approach bullying, India, Pakistan.
Exactly.
How much are we getting dialogue about peace?
Exactly. But what we're trying to move away from is just measuring it by impressions or conversations.
Or Coca-Cola sold.
Or just Coca-Cola sold. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
That's important.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much, Leo.
Thanks.